My name's Matt Lees from VideogamerTV, and I haven't had a shave for reasons that will become evident later this week. But for now, I'd like to talk about Don Mattrick and the real truth behind why he left Microsoft. Don Mattrick left his job at Microsoft because he got a new job. Now, I shouldn't have to explain this, but it seems like a lot of the internet has gone full-on insane. Although actually, in a fully sane world, it would make a lot of sense for Don Mattrick to be pushed out of his position at Microsoft based on an entirely fluffed E3. But the world doesn't really work in the way that it should. First things first, the hyper-rich elite of this world don't really care about what we think until we start going out and setting fire to things. And secondly, it's just not how employment works. When you're in an entry position job, your notice period tends to be maybe a couple of weeks or a month. But somebody at Don's level will have had to give at least 6 months notice, if not a year, that he was leaving, which means the idea that any of this is related to anything that's happened within the last 2 months is madness. And that's a shame, because it would be awesome to live in a world in which hyper-rich CEOs were punished for making mistakes in any capacity. But as it stands, that's simply not the case. And actually, if you look back at how things have panned out recently, everything makes so much more sense. At the time, we naturally assumed that Don Mattrick just didn't give a fuck about gamers, and that might be true. But actually, when you look back now and look at his face, it's clear that he doesn't give a fuck, but for different reasons. Now, anyone who's ever handed in their notice at a job knows exactly how this rolls. Even if you're super professional, you get to a point where you know that your contract is almost up and you just stop giving a fuck about everything. Before I started working in the games industry, I worked in a cafe in Tatton Park, and I specifically remember on my last few days, the head chef turning to me and saying, "Matt, why aren't these pans clean?" And I turned around to him and calmly explained, "Because I don't give a shit." Now, I'm not saying that Don Mattrick isn't a dick for fundamentally disrespecting our love and passion for our hobby, but at the same time, it is a bit of a natural human response. Regardless of what job you do and how much money you earn, one of the few simple pleasures in life once you get to a certain age are these tiny gaps between jobs where you can just go, "I don't care about this anymore, and I don't have to care about it." These tiny bubbles where you have absolutely no responsibility and you can just behave like a child. But most of the time when changing positions within an industry, you can't do that. You can't behave like that because you're gonna damage your future role. But this is Zynga, a company that gamers fundamentally hate and will always hate. So to be perfectly honest, the fact that he's pissed us all off doesn't mean anything. So yeah, that's why Don Mattrick left Microsoft, and that's why he acted like a bit of a tool. But actually, there's another question here that's quite important. Why did Microsoft send him up to say all those things? Now, I'm not diving headfirst into the conspiracy pond here, so there are two sides to this. First of all, he was the president. If they went out without him there talking about Xbox One, it would have looked really weird, and actually their stock prices would have dropped substantially just because people would have freaked the flip out. But secondly, doesn't this feel like a bit of a weird advantage for Microsoft? Sending out a guy who then gets filled with bullets only to be discarded so you can start again. There is an element here that perhaps this is just part of a greater PR plan that is all falling into place. But anyway, we won't know what the real deal is until we see how the rest of these things pan out. But for now, it is worth bearing in mind that when he walked out on stage and when he did those interviews after E3, he knew that he was leaving Microsoft, and Microsoft knew that he was leaving Microsoft. So it does add a slightly different spin to everything. Anyway, that's all for this time. Bye!